For anyone that's joined so far and in the blurb for the workshop, if you plan on following along, you don't have to, but if you would like to, if you've not already downloaded Tableau Public, I've put a link to download that in the chat, and there's also a link to download 2 data sets that we're going to be using as well, and a couple of tips to how to make your screen bigger if you're having difficulties seeing the hopping screen as well. So just if you've not got any of those things, they're all linked in the chat there. Julianne has just asked a good question. Is this a good tool even for small size data sets? Yeah, it is. The data sets that we're going to be looking at today are really small, well, in comparison size of data. So yeah, hopefully you'll get a good practice of that. Just give it one more minute for everyone to arrive. Cool, so it's now 5:02, so welcome to this workshop. It's all about using Tableau. This is aimed at people who haven't used Tableau before, and hopefully it's going to be an interactive workshop. You definitely don't have to follow along if you don't want to, but if you would like to follow along, then if you can download Tableau if you haven't already, which I've linked in the chat. There's also some data sets there to download too, and some tips on how to make your screen bigger. Absolutely don't worry if you've not been able to download any of it or you don't want to follow along. I really hope you'll still get a lot out of the session, and of course you can watch it back, and all the slides I will send them out at the end, which like step by step covers everything we're going to do today. So don't worry if you get lost at any point. Cool, so I will just get started. So who am I? I am Aileen, and I work for a not-for-profit social enterprise in Scotland where we teach courses on data and also software development, and I'm also a volunteer at DataKind UK. So the aim for today is we're going to learn some transferable dashboard building skills, specifically in Tableau, but a lot of these tools are quite similar. So hopefully, you know, if you get hooked on Tableau today, that won't stop you being able to get hooked on one of the other dashboard building tools as well. Like I say, it's going to be an interactive workshop, but you definitely do not have to follow along if you don't want to. Feel free to just watch. We are going to be a fake charity, and we've got some fake charity data, and we're going to try and answer some organizational questions with that data. We're going to work through it together, and like I say, for anyone that's joined late, if you do want to follow along, I've linked the link to download Tableau Public, which is free, and also the data sets. And like I say, I'll send all the slides at the end of the talk as well, but of course you can watch it back in your own time too. So hopefully you know some benefits of using things like Tableau, which is why you're at the session. But these are some of the kind of big key benefits of using dashboard building tools. So one great thing is it makes it really easy to share reports and dashboards. And the great thing about it is they're interactive. So I don't know if you've ever found you've had to produce a graph at many different levels of granularity, maybe at like month level, day level, week level, because different people in the organization want it at different levels of detail. Tableau lets the user drill into whatever level that they want. It also holds bigger data sets. So Excel kind of has a limit of what it can hold. Tableau can handle much bigger data sets, and it can also pull in data from loads of different places. So you can pull in data from a CSV file, your CRM system, your Google Analytics, and you can pull these all and view them in one single dashboard in one place, which is really exciting. Also, you get automatic updates. So if you've got like streaming data that's updating all the time, like your social media or something like that, it's not a problem. Your dashboard can automatically update. You can also get multiple people being able to use and build dashboards at the same time. And also one thing I really like about it is, because when I started, I was like, maybe I have to recreate some of these graphs in a static manner in Excel because I don't want them in an interactive way. Well, in Tableau, you can actually download static versions of your reports. And we're also going to cover what's called stories in Tableau, and they're a really nice way of presenting your dashboards. And the fantastic thing is you don't need to be able to code to do any of the above, which is nice. So, like I said, Tableau is a dashboard building tool which brings data from multiple sources together. And one of the great benefits of Tableau is it works on both Windows and Mac computers. So one of the downsides of things like Power BI can sometimes be they don't work on all operating systems. Tableau works on both, which is really fantastic. And there's lots of links in the slides. Whenever you see an underlined word, that's a hyperlink. Tableau also have some really great inspiration online. So they do this Viz of the Day, and it shows you some dashboards that people have built. There's some cool stuff in there, things like data from the Oscars and things like that. So if you need inspiration, I definitely suggest checking that out. There's an organization called Gartner who do kind of research in these BI tools, business intelligence tools, and Tableau and Power BI tend to come out on the top because of the amount of people that use them, which is really great because it means there's loads of resources out there for learning them as well, which is fantastic. Can be a bit confusing. There's a lot of Tableau products going around. We are going to be using today Tableau Public because it's free. But the great thing about it is all the skills that we are going to learn will be transferable no matter the product that you purchase. So the downside about Tableau Public is there's a more limited amount of data that you can connect to. And also, when you save your dashboard, you kind of have to push it onto the internet. So if it's sensitive data in any way, then this would not be the one for you. The other ones are paid versions, but like I say, the skills to build the dashboard on top of data are the same, which is great. So there's different products that you can purchase here, and it depends on what kind of data storage you want. Sometimes different ones of these, you host your own data, other ones Tableau can host it for you. But Tableau have a foundation where they want charitable organisations to be using Tableau, and they donate free or reduced fee licenses, and they also donate some of their employees' time, which is really cool. If you're stuck on anything, they've got dedicated team members that you can phone up and ask for technical help. And there's links in the slides to projects that has featured as part of this foundation. So if you're interested in finding a bit more about reduced fee or free licenses, there's links in the notes. You have to meet certain criteria for it, but once you get onto that website, you can see if you match the criteria, and then it will take you to, depending on what country your charity is based in, the distributing partner in that country. And there's also links there to the Tableau technical help as well. Another great thing is they actually have a whole page of kind of inspiration for not-for-profits. So they have lots of cases of charities using data and using Tableau to visualize their data to answer their organizational questions. And you can go through that page and look at different examples. There's one quite nice one I've linked there, which is about donor data. So like, who are our donors, when do they give, how much, etc. So if you're looking for inspiration, I'd definitely check out those pages there. So sometimes, just before we start actually with the technical stuff, the planning is really important of your dashboard. And it's been a message throughout some of the talks that I've attended this week is you don't always want to start with the data, you want to start with the questions that you want to answer and kind of work back the way. Because you want to be thinking, in an ideal world, if I had all the data I wanted, what are the questions that I would like to answer? And kind of finding an absence of data is also a finding within itself, and it kind of tells you where your gaps are. You always want to be thinking about who the end users of your dashboard are and how they're going to use the information. So, there's been really great talks on like data storytelling and things through this event, and it's thinking about who are the people that are going to use this and how they're going to use the information, because you might design it differently depending on who your users are. There's also, in this new virtual world, sometimes we can't all stand around together around a whiteboard to plan it. So there's lots of free online tools out there for designing and sketching. I've linked to one called Excalidraw, which sounds very grand, which I quite like for drawing designs. Also sometimes just use JS Paint, which is a bit old school, but it works in the same way. So things like that are really good, because getting the kind of buy-in and the agreement of the level of design and granularity at the start can save you a lot of time at the end. Cool. So again, this has been a kind of message that other people have said in talks, but you want to be thinking about why you are tracking something. So I am very guilty of this. I'm just like, oh, one more graph. Oh, I'll just plot this in case someone finds this interesting. So it's difficult. Well, I find it difficult, but it's really important because people get saturated with too much information and nothing becomes important when you track everything. So you always want to be thinking about the why I'm tracking this. So what is it that I expect the action to be if this number changes or something like that? Because dashboards can grow arms and legs. You're never going to please everyone, and that's why you always want to have like a kind of core group of users in mind, and that should try and focus your planning in some way. Not easy though, when people are coming at you being like, oh, I just want this. So yeah, it's not easy. So let's get down to it. So just in case anyone joined late, as I said, I've linked in the chat to download the data files, and also if you haven't downloaded Tableau yet, you can do that. But like I say, don't feel pressure to follow along if you don't want to. So hopefully these are the two data files that you have, and they should be in your downloads folder, and you can save them somewhere else in your folder that's easy for you to navigate to. You don't need to open them up, but I'll just show you what's in them. So we're a fake charity, and we have 3 services, A, B, and C. And these are the 2 CSV files that we are going to be using to answer our organizational questions. So we have this service user data, which has 1 row per service user, and it tells us a little bit about them, how old they are, where they're from, their outer postcode, so the kind of postcode area that they are in, which service they use from our charity, and also we've got them to fill out a survey before and after using our services. That survey goes on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. And so obviously we hope for them to have an improvement after coming to our service. And then we have another CSV file which has dates of visits. So this is how many times and when people have visited our services. So the service user data is 1 row per service user, but a service user could come to our service many times. So you might find a service user appearing in the dates of use CSV many, many times. And this kind of one-to-many join can be quite difficult in Excel, well, almost impossible, and you have to kind of aggregate your data in a way, but in Tableau we don't need to worry about that, which is great. Cool. Not that I'm saying Excel is bad, I do love Excel, so that will come later in the day. So these are the questions that we want to answer. So like I say, we're starting with the question and working back the way. So we want to know, how do the number of visits differ between services? So are more people coming to service A than service B? Whereabouts are our users from? How does the usage of our service change over time? So, you know, is there a drop? Are people consistently using our services? And also, you know, we've taken this outcome survey. Does that differ for each service type? So are we getting more positive changes for service A versus service C? This is what we're going to look at. And fingers crossed, by the end of the session today, this is the dashboard that we will be creating that answers these questions. So time permitting, this is what we're going to get to. So this is the dashboard, and the top left, this one up here, this tells us how do the number of visits differ between service. So we can see here that service C has the most. We also see that the outcome change by service over here. So how are the number of people? So we've got 7 people having a positive outcome change in service B. We've got how the service usage changed over time in the bottom left, and we've also got a map to show us where our service users are from. And all of this is interactive and allows people to sort of drill into the data however they like. And also we can answer questions like, I don't know, where are all the people that have positive outcomes in service A? Where are they sitting? And that actually filters the rest of the map. So this is what I'm talking about in terms of interactivity and letting people kind of explore the data themselves, because every user might have their own questions there. So let's get to it. If you plan on following along, I want you to open Tableau up, and it should look something like this. You won't have all this gobbledygook of all my test dashboards of other bits, but hopefully you'll get something that looks like this. So on the left-hand side, we get this connect area, and this is where we tell Tableau to connect to some data. So as I said, we are using the free version of Tableau, so it's more limited. We can connect to things like Excel or CSV files. You can also apparently connect to a PDF, and if it's got a table in it, then it's meant to load in the table from your PDF. I've never tried it, but I'd be really interested to know if it works, because if it does, that would be pretty cool. And there's also spatial files. So spatial files are files with geographic information in them. So there's loads of free available spatial files kind of by government organizations or kind of these data trusts, things like local authority level, ward level, country level, all the levels. And you can download these and you can use that as part of Tableau, which is really cool. I've got some links in the slides to do that as well. Like I say, if you've got the paid version of Tableau, then there's loads more things you can connect to: databases, CRM system, etc., etc. So we are going to load our data in. So the files that we are using are CSV files, and they come under the text file kind of category of data. So if you click on text file, it should navigate to somewhere in your computer. So I want you to kind of find wherever it is that your files are saved. It might be in your downloads, or you might have saved them in your documents or something like that. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on service user data. So service user data CSV first, and we're going to open that up. And you should hopefully get a magical window that looks like this. And if anyone's having any difficulties kind of seeing the screen, I've popped some hints in the chat of how to make the hop-in screen a bit bigger if you're using, depends if you're using 1 or 2 screens here. So this is what hopefully you should get, and this is the data source page. So this is telling us all about the data. So what we get down the bottom here is a nice preview of the data. So we see all our fields that we had. We get this area up here, which is called the canvas, and this is where we can build relationships in our data. And we get the connections up the top here as well. So we're currently connected to 1 CSV file, but I could set up another connection to a database, another connection to a CRM system, so on and so forth. If you go to, there's like a little table symbol, and then there's a little like line symbol next to it across here. I don't use very fancy terminology in these workshops, apologies. This gives you a view of the metadata. Metadata is data about data, which sometimes makes me feel like I'm in Inception or something. But you might think, well, why do I need this tab? If you think about it, if your data was really wide, like you had hundreds of columns, I'd have to keep scrolling left and right between all those columns to see what's in my data. This sort of metadata view is quite handy for just giving me an overview of all my columns. So you might be thinking, what are these weird symbols at the top of each of the columns? Well, these are the data types. And this is quite good because it tells you some information about each of the data types, and it's important how these are recognized in Tableau because it will matter for what you can then do later. So green means measure, and that's a numeric number, something you can add together. It can either be a decimal number or a whole number. And then all the rest of them basically are dimensions, things that you can kind of chop up your measures by. So you get things like dates, text, and also geographic as well. Now, Tableau is very good at recognizing what things are, but if you ever found, I always do like a quick check first to see that all my data types are being picked up correctly. So here I see that like age is a numeric measure, which is great, and so are these. ID is a bit of a weird one. So it is a number, which is why it's that hashtag, but it's blue, not green. And the reason ID columns are blue as a dimension and not a measure is because you can't add them up in a way that like ID1 plus ID2 does not equal ID3, because you can't add our two service users to make the third service user. So that's like a bit of a weird thing about ID columns if your IDs are numbers. So first thing that we do is we take a look and we think, okay, is my data the correct type? And it's looking pretty good here. We could change local authority to be geographic, but only if we need to use it in a map. So if I just wanted a bar chart of all the local authorities, not a problem. Doesn't really matter that Tableau's not recognizing this as a geography. But if I did want to use it on a map, I would need to go in, and you can change the data types by clicking on the little symbol, and you can change it to whatever you like. Sometimes I'm a bit unsure of what level of geography. I either Google it to find out what level it is, because sometimes it's a bit US centric of like district and things like that. Or I try it, and if it fails, I try something else. So yeah, that's what I tend to do. Just break it and hope it works. So the next thing that we're going to do is, you might have loads of columns of data and you kind of want to get rid of some of them. This won't change your underlying data. This will just be like, make your space a bit less cluttered. So if you ever want to get rid of a column, we're not going to actually use the age column. You can use the little drop down next to age and do hide. This is quite good because it kind of declutters your space if you're then going on to do other things. And the last kind of cleanup of this is you can change your column names. So again, this is not changing the underlying data in the CSV files. What this changes is how we see it and how the users see it. So if you click on the little drop down next to the second last column, the pre-service outcome, and go to rename, we are going to change it to outcome before. And the last one, we're going to change it to outcome after. Just make these column names a bit shorter, sharper, easier to understand. Cool. So we've checked our data is the right type. We've checked that it is kind of what we want here. And what we can now do is bring in more data. So I've got a bit in the slides because there's two different ways you can bring in data. You can bring in data that is actually connected to your data in some way, so has a relationship. So in our case, there is a relationship between our data sets. because they're linked by the ID column. However, if I wanted to bring in data that was unrelated, like financial information about the organization or something like that, there's no like link to my data, they're not linked by a column, we would want to bring in a new data source. So there's a bit in the slides there about how you would add those two different things in there. So we are going to build a relationship in our data. So what I want you to do is the other data set is probably sitting somewhere in this files section, because they'll probably both be in the same folder. You will have to have unzipped the file by double clicking on it to get both of these. If you've got loads of CSV files in the folder, which I definitely do in my downloads, you can use the little magnifying glass and search for it. So the other one that we're going to use is called dates of use, and so you can search for it in there. And then once you find it, you can click on it, and I want you to drag it into this canvas area, and this nice little orange line should appear, and you just drop it, and this little pop-up box should appear. And what this is saying is, how do you want these two data sets to be joined? Again, Tableau's quite good at working these things out. They're both called ID in both of our data sets, but it wouldn't matter if it was called something else. So if on one of them it was called like service user ID, it's not a problem. And if Tableau has calculated the wrong field to join by, you can kind of go through these to work that out. Luckily, it's picked up fine. You can also choose other fields as well if you want to join by more than one field. So that's joined it exactly how we want. So that is happy days, and we can cross that off. Just checking the questions a wee bit. Is there an easy way to unhide a column? That's a good question. I think you would have to go back in here. I think there's leave that with me. I'm sure there's, oh yeah, I think it's show hidden fields. Yeah, and then you'd be able to go to unhide. So yeah, if you click on show hidden fields on the right here, that shows you all the columns that you've hidden, in case you've hidden something by mistake. So yeah, it happens to me as well. Cool, so what happens if our data is refreshed at any point? Like you've got new data coming in and you want that to be updated. There's this nice little refresh button. So if new service users were added to our CSV, not a problem. Our data kind of source that we have created would just update, which is fantastic. And something that I use all the time, what happens if someone moves my CSV file, or I move it without realizing? Also not a problem. What if that happened, because Tableau will basically navigate to wherever you've pointed it to, right now maybe in your downloads folder. You right click on here and go to edit connection, and you can basically remap to wherever yourself or someone else has moved it to. So yeah, don't worry if that happens, because it happens. So the last bit of data prep that we're going to do is we're going to calculate a new column. So like I said, sometimes you don't have access to the database or the CSV file, and you can't make new columns in Excel or the database, so you have to do it in Tableau. So you can do these things called calculated fields. So to do that, what we're going to do is if you right click on the last column and you go to create calculated field, and you get this little pop-up that looks like this. So the top right, what it basically is saying is, what do you want the column to be called? And this first, we're going to make two columns. The first one we're going to make, and it's going to be the difference between the survey after and before. So we are going to call it outcome change. So to get here, you right click on the last column and go to create calculated field, and you'll hopefully get this pop-up box. So we're going to call it outcome change, and the pop-up box get automatically populated with the name of your last column. But if you don't have that, or you're clicked on another column, it's not a problem. You can start afresh. And to reference a column, another column in your data within this calculation, what we do is we use an open square, well, open and close, but we're going to start with an open square brackets. And what I want you to do is start writing outcome, and you'll get this kind of autocorrect thing coming up. Now, I use this all the time because my spelling is atrocious. You can continue to type outcome before and it'll work. But if you're like me and you want to use the kind of auto correction here, you can navigate with your up and down arrows between these two, and I'm going to go for outcome. No, I'm going to go for outcome after. That's bad maths. Outcome after. Or you can just keep typing it and close off with the square brackets, and we're going to take away the outcome before. And fingers crossed, down the bottom left, you'll get a thing saying your calculation is valid, which means there's no errors. Happy days. So outcome after minus outcome before. And you can click OK. And what you'll see is this new pop-up, this new field appears for us. So as you can see here, for this person 2, their outcome after was 5, their outcome before was 3, so they've had a change of 2. And you can also see this has been kind of recognized as a measure, and it's really tiny, but there's a tiny little equal sign next to it, which basically means you calculated it. This wasn't in the data to start with. So we're going to create one last column, and we're going to right click on the last one, and what we're going to talk about now is formulas. So you might have this auto opened. If not, there's a kind of open and close arrow bit on the side here. And this is a nice little box which tells you about the formulas which are available when you're calculating new fields. Google is also a great resource for finding out more about functions. I don't remember all these functions. When I need to go and do something, I'm like, I'm sure there's a function for that. And I Google it, and I find that some nice person has created a function to do it. If you're kind of used to Excel and things like that, then a lot of the functions are pretty similar between these. So there's things like if you wanted to find what day of the week a date was, or extract the username in an email address, like the bit before the @ things like that. You can do all these kind of things using these functions in Tableau, which is really cool. So the function that we are going to be using, and you don't necessarily need to type this. This is just a kind of help file, but you can find out about the functions here. But you might ask, well, how would I know which function to search for? I'd probably do that in Google first. So this is quite handy because it tells you what is the syntax or the way that you need to type out your code. Then it tells you a bit about what it's actually doing, and then it gives you a nice little example, which I usually kind of copy. So we're going to be using an if statement. So the if statement, what we're going to look to do is if our outcome change is positive, we want to return the word positive. If our outcome change is 0, we want to return the word none. And if our outcome change is negative, we want to return the word negative. So if statements kind of work as follows, and like I say, some of you guys might know about these already if you do coding or you are an Excel whiz. We want to have some kind of condition and then follow that with what do I want to be returned if that condition is met. So our last column that we're making is going to be called outcome change sign. And we're going to write this as follows, and I'll pop this in the chat as well in case you're having difficulty reading this at any point, because it's a bit of typing. So I'm following the syntax that is being written here, and it's saying, okay, I need to write the word if, followed by some expression, then the word then, and then whatever I want to be returned. So I want my open close bracket because I want to use the value in one of my other columns, which is the outcome change column. If this is less than 0, and we have to use this mathematical operator, so this kind of pointed to the left means less than, so less than 0, then we want to return the word negative. And you need to put the term in single quotation marks so it knows that it's like a string and not a string being text and not like some other column or function. And then we say else if outcome change is 0, equal to 0, then return the word none. I'm going to take a new line, but you don't need to take a new line. I'm just going to do it so you can see the rest of it. And then we say else positive, because all the other ones are positive. If they're not negative or they're not none. And then you have to write the word end. I'm going to pop this into the chat just in case anyone's having any problems with this. Cool. So get to here, and hopefully you've got a message saying the calculation is valid, and we're going to say OK. And what we get here is if the outcome change is 0, then we get the word none, 2 is positive, etc. So we have done all our data prep, and we are good to go and start building our visualizations. So to visualize the data, you'll see down the bottom, they're really small, but we've got some 3 little symbols down the bottom here. If you hover over the left-hand symbol that says new worksheet, if you hover over the one in the middle, which I think looks like, is that a Battenberg, whatever those cakes are, Kipling something, that's a new dashboard. And the last one is a new story, the one that looks like a little book. So it goes as follows: 1 visualization per worksheet. So we do 1 visualization per worksheet. So we create all our worksheets, and then we shove them all together in a dashboard. So 1 visualization per worksheet, put them all together in a dashboard, and I'm going to show you an example of a story at the end as well. So it actually auto kind of creates 1 worksheet for you. So you'll probably also already have one called sheet 1 down the bottom. So you can click on that, or you can click on the wee symbol that says new worksheet, or so many options. You can go up the top and click worksheet and then new worksheet. As with Tableau and lots of other tools, there's many different ways to navigate to the same thing. So it kind of depends on your personal preference of how you want to get there. So this is our canvas. This is where we're going to start being data artists and build our nice visualizations. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see all the data sources. So we've connected to 2 data files. You can hide, kind of fold them down if you decide that you're not using it at the moment. You can imagine if you've got many data sets to be linked to, this can get quite cluttered as well. This is the area where we'll build the visualization. And these 2 we're going to use a few times. This is called the rows and column shelves. We're also going to talk about marks, which is like how we detail our visualization, and filters, which is where we build the filters that let our users kind of dig into our data as we so wish. And what you'll see in the left-hand side is there's a very faint grey line for each of the data connections. Above the green line sits all the dimensions, below it sits all the measures. So it's quite nice that it does that. So one thing is difficult is knowing what graph to build. There's lots out there. This is a nice kind of little flow chart to give you some information on it. And there's different links to different charts. And I've also got a link here to about recommendations about chart junk. Now, there was a talk on Monday by Oliver, which was fantastic, and I highly recommend, it was about data visualization, if you've not seen it, to go to it. But he talked a lot about chart junk. Chart junk's a little bit harder to do on Tableau, like you really have to do it on purpose, but in Excel, it can be a bit easier to do. But it's thinking about the fact that you only want kind of what they call ink, or the information on your visualization to be referring to the data. So making your basically simplistic is best. Avoiding things like colored backgrounds and unnecessary use of color, 3D effect, that kind of thing. Anything that detracts the user from actually being able to analytically compare how much higher is this bar from another bar, because it can get a bit confusing if there's all this sort of what they term chart junk. So I quite like this little visualization for talking about chart junk. So we can build the visualizations in many different ways, but what we are going to do is we're going to pop the kind of rows, the fields in the rows and columns shelf. And this really just comes from playing around. Like I say, This is meant to be fun. If you break stuff, there's a back button. There's this undo button on the left, which is great. And also kind of, you can delete your sheet if you're like, this is going terribly wrong. So I really just recommend Tableau is just messing around and trying to get it how you want, really. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to build our bar chart, which tells us which service had the most visits. So the thing that we want to split by is the service type. So if you click on service on the left-hand side, this basically becomes what's called like a pill, and it kind of highlights the whole area. If you click on service and you drag it in to the columns shelf, so drag it in to the column shelf and drop it there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the ID column from the service user data. So we want to count how many people that are in each service. So it wasn't the visits, it's how many people are in each service. So we want to take the ID pill from the service user data CSV and drop it on here. Now you get this really weird looking table. And the first time that I used Tableau, I was like, this is not what I want. So what this does is it's an unaggregated view of the table of the data. So what it's telling me is there's a little A, B, and C because person 1 is in service A, person 2 is in service A, person 3 is in service B. But this is not what we're looking for. We want to know the count in a nice sort of graphical form. So what you do is for your pill that's on the row shelf, if you right click the ID column, and right now it's a dimension, but what we want to do is we want to aggregate it in some way. So we're going to go down to measure and we're going to count. Now, of course, you could sum them if you wanted, although summing IDs doesn't really make sense here because, as I said, adding person 1 plus person 2 doesn't equal person 3. But if you had something like, I don't know, something that you would add up like salary or something like that, you could do sum or average or something. But we're going to do count, and hopefully you get this lovely looking bar chart. If you don't have this lovely looking bar chart, don't panic. One thing that may have happened if you get a different kind of chart, if you go up to the top right, there's this button called Show Me. And if anyone's doing a one screen split, they might have to kind of close me off for a second, which I recommend, and widen your Tableau because sometimes the Show Me button doesn't appear. But if you go to Show Me, this shows you the other visualizations that you can choose. Some of them are grayed out, and that's because you haven't dragged the data that is appropriate for that graph into your workspace. So you'll see here that the maps are grayed out, the kind of second row of data of visualizations have maps, because I haven't dragged any geographic information into my workspace. I do have it over here, like in my data set, but I haven't dragged it into my workspace to be used. So you can play around here. We could make an area chart where the size of the box kind of makes a difference there. You can do a bubble. You can make a pie, but we'll not get into that. I'm not going to start that debate today. And a table as well, if you just want the raw data here. If anyone's kind of getting a bit stuck, don't worry, or you've kind of lost where things are, sometimes it can rearrange things. You can start again. So if you ever have something on your shelf or in the mark section, which we're going to come on to speak about in a minute, you can remove them. So you can right click and go to remove it. Or what I like to do is click it and drag it into this gray zone of death, and it just kind of disappears. So again, you can right click and remove it if you want. I'm just going to get back to where I was. I'm going to put service here. I'm going to put ID on the row shelf, and then I'm going to go down to measure and then count. Great. I'm actually just going to show you a little bit. I'm going to go to a table right now, and you don't need to follow along with this, but just to let you know that you can split by more than one variable. So if I drag local authority, and the order here matters. So if I drag local authority into the side on the left, what you get is for each service type, the split of each local authority. So I know that there's 17 people for service A in Edinburgh. But if I move the local authority pill to the left of service, oh, I've just deleted it, that wasn't what I meant to do. Onto the left of service, what you'll get is for each local authority, the split of service. So you can really start to play around with like order and things like that here. So I'm gonna get rid of this, and I'm gonna get back to my not my pie chart, geez, my bar chart. Also, another thing that might happen is you get it horizontally. To get it back to be vertical, you click on the little kind of left, right-angled 6 squares with the double arrow pointy thing, and that swaps it to be back the way, which is the way I want it. Another thing, you don't have to do this, but for some unbeknown reason, there probably is a logic behind this, it makes it really squished together, the chart. So up the top, if you go to standard, you can go to entire view, and that makes it nice and spread out, which is nice. Cool. So this has given us what we wanted with the count of service users for each service, but the question that we're looking to answer from this visualization is, how do the outcome change differ for each service? So we're going to learn a little bit about the marks section here. So the columns and rows is where you construct like the core of what you're going to have in your graph. In this sense, it's what's on the x-axis, the axis along the bottom, and what's being counted on the y-axis, the horizontal one. But then we can start playing around with the marks. And marks are really cool. This is where you can add like splits by color, you can add labels, you can add tooltips. Tooltips is what you see when you hover over different bits, which is nice if you don't want to if you don't want to have it in your graph, but you want people to hover over and see. So if you click on outcome change sign, which is a dimension, and you drag that and drop it on the little color box. So drag it and drop it on the little color box, and we get this monstrosity of colors. But it is doing what we want. So if I kind of hover over here, I know that for service A, 10 people has a positive outcome change. So they had a positive outcome change using our service, 6 people had no outcome change, and 7 people had a negative one. Now, these colors are pretty terrible. So what we're going to do is we're going to change them. So if you click on the color marks, the little color box, which is where we dragged outcome change sign onto, and click on color and go to edit colors, this is where we can start being an artiste and playing around with colors. There's an automatic color palette. I'd advise, if you're making some sort of public facing dashboard, to think about accessibility. So there's color palettes here for things like color blindness, because you want hopefully the whole population as much as you can to be able to distinguish between the colors if you're using that in your data. So, but what we're going to do is not that. We're going to manually set our colors. So if you click on the negative one, and just because of the way, you know, we've been trained, I'm going to make that red because that's, you know, danger color. If you click on none, we're going to set that to gray, and if you click on positive, you're going to set that to green, just because they're the kind of colors that people associate with these types of things. So again, you just click on each of them, and then on the right hand side you can select one of the colors, and if you wanted to have colors from different palettes, you would just use this drop down. So I'm going to click OK, and oh, that's much better. Nice looking colors here. The only thing that I would change here is I'm going to change the order, because I think people tend to read like I'd rather read negative to positive. So I want all the negative people on the bottom and then to go up to positive, but that's total personal preference. If you want to change the order of these, there's this legend up the top right. Legends are kind of things that tell us what do these colors mean. Really important to have them, otherwise people can't read your graph. So if you click on negative and drag it down, and if you click on positive and drag it up, that will reorder your graph here. Not a necessity, you may prefer to read it the other way, but that's how you change the order of these. So yeah, this is what we wanted. We've answered our first question with this graph, happy days. So what we're going to do, because we're following best practices, is we are going to rename our sheet. And the reason we're going to name our sheets is because when we go to build our dashboard, if they're not named correctly, you have no idea what graph is where. So if you go down to the bottom on sheet 1 and you right click and we go to rename, we're going to call this outcome change by service, or something equally as meaningful. If you want to call it something else, don't worry at all. Oh, and the last thing, I knew there was something else I wanted to do. The last thing I wanted to do was make sure that my axes have meaningful names. So my axis title here says count of ID. And if I was a user of a dashboard, I might be like, what is count of ID? So you can right click on the axis. And if you go to edit axis, there's different things you can do. You can change the font, you can change the text size, you could change it to like percentage, pounds, etc. But what we're going to do in the general tab is just change the title. So I'm going to call it count of service users. Or if you want to use some other terminology, that's not a problem. So count of service users. Fabulous. So we have answered our first question with this graph. So let's make 2 more visuals now that we know what we're doing. We're going to go to a new worksheet. So you can either click on the little new worksheet thing down the bottom, or you can go to worksheet, new worksheet. And this time what we are going to do is look at the number of visits per service. So another bar chart, but this time it's going to show us the number of visits rather than the number of people. So similar steps, we're going to take the service pill and drop it onto columns. And this time we're going to take the ID pill from the dates of use column data set, because it's now I want to know how many people visited each service, not how many service users are there. So it's the ID pill on the under the dates of use CSV, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And again, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to click on it and we're going to down to measure and we're going to go to count. Fabulous. So what we see now, quite interestingly here, is even though service A has the most amount of service users, service C was actually visited the most. And I just want to pause here for a second. You don't need to open your spreadsheets, but I just want to reiterate the fact that these 2 bits of information are not from the same spreadsheet. So the number of times someone visits the service is from this spreadsheet, but which service they are visiting from is this spreadsheet. So like we just take a minute to wonder in this, the fact that it's information from 2 different places that we've brought together, and that's allowed us to answer that question. So because we set up that relationship between the data at the start, it's allowed us to answer this question, which is pretty cool. Well, I don't know what your definition of cool is, but I think it's pretty cool. So again, we're going to go up the top to standard, and we're just going to go entire view. I'm going to click on the axis, and I'm going to do right click, edit axis, and I'm going to change this to count of visits. Again, these are all kind of pernickety things, but we just want to follow best practices for this. The last thing that I want to show you is you can also add what, as I was saying before, tooltips or labels. So if I drag the ID pill onto label, you get this horrible looking thing, which is fine. What we're going to do again, the ID pill here, we're going to right click, we're going to measure, and we're going to count. And what you get now is the actual counts as little labels on top of the bars if you wanted that. And another thing that you can do is you can make them percentages. So you don't need to do this, but if you wanted to, you could right click on that pill and you go down to quick table calculation. And this allows you to do things like percentage of total, percentage of each service type, this kind of thing, you can really play around with it. So if you do percentage of running total, why is that not worked? I did that wrong. Let me try that again. Label, measure, count, quick table calculation. Oh, it's percentage of total, sorry, not running total. Percentage of total, my apologies. So what you get is something that looks like this. So now I've not only got the count of visits, so for service A, I've got 364 people, no, there was 364 visits to our service, but I also know that of all the visits, it was 36.4% of all the visits. If I had a bit more time, I'd go in there and drop one of those decimal points because it's a bit unnecessary. But for the sake of time, we will persevere. So I'm going to rename this sheet, and I'm going to rename it visits by service. Cool, and let's make our last kind of graph. We're going to make a line graph to show the service use over time. So this time, what we're going to put in the columns shelf is date of visits. And we are again going to drag the ID pill from the dates of use one into here. Sorry, that was the wrong one. It's the ID one into here. And again, we want to right click, measure count. You can see the steps kind of get a bit repetitive now that we know what we're doing. But I wanted to show this graph because I want to show you a little cool thing about dates in Tableau. Now, you can make a drop down that allows the user to change the granularity of the data. So, you know, change between the week or month or whatever, but we can also set it here. And you don't need to follow this, but I just want to draw your attention to this because the first time I saw this, I was like, why? You'll see that you can pick the different ways that you can drop. You can kind of split your data by. So I could have it at month or day or like month or day, but you see that month and day and things appear twice here. So I'm just going to show you the difference between this top month option and the bottom one. You may already know this, but this, if I pick the bottom one, what this does is give me one data point per month of every year. So our data goes between 2019 and 2020, and what I get is one data point for January 2019, one for February, so on and so forth. But if I pick the other month, what you get is an aggregated view. So even if I had 10 years of data in my data set, what this says is for all the years available, how many visits were in January. So this kind of lets you see a month by month view, a kind of across all time to see if there's patterns there. And what you'd see, the way I remember this is if I go to day, there's usually a drop off on the 31st because it's adding up all the visits on all the 31st, and not all months have 31. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on the date pill in the columns, and we're going to go to the second option of month. So the second option of month, which gives us our dates over time. And what we want to do is we want to know how the visits differ for each service type. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the service pill. I keep clicking on things for too long, and drop it onto the color option here. So drop it onto the colored marks card. And now I know that service C had the highest number of visits at the start, but then as time went on, service A kind of overtook it at certain points in time. And again, you can go in, change the axes, titles, change the colors if you so wished, that kind of thing. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is highlighting and filtering. So highlighting is when, say I click on the legend over here, if I click on A, what this does is it keeps all my data, so all the data from A, B, and C is there, but like it kind of grays out B and C and just pops out A. And so that's highlighting, retains all the data, but kind of only brings one of them to the forefront. Filtering is slightly different because you actually filter the data, shockingly, and you kind of drop all the data bar the bit that you would like. So I want the user to be able to pick just one of the services if they so wish, and I want them to be able to pick a certain time frame if they so wished as well. So to do this, what we do is we take the pill that we would like, or the field that we would like to be filtered, and drop it in the filters box. So the first one that we want to do is the service one. So click on the service pill and drop it into filters. And what you get is this box. So you, as the dashboard creator, could filter the data in some way. So say I wanted to make a graph that only included data from service C. I could untick A and B here, and in my build of my visualization, I only have data from service C. But what I want to do here, or sorry, we want to do here, is we want to allow the user to be able to filter the data for themselves. So I want the default to be all the data there, but the user can filter it if they want. So if you click OK, nothing happens, which the first time I saw this, I was like, where's my filter? So on the filters tab, if you right click and go to show filter, it appears on the right hand side there. So in your service pill here, if you right click and go to show filter, it appears on the right hand side. And there's loads of things that you can do to change your filter. We're not going to go into it too much now, but if you only want someone to be able to pick one at a time, so you can multi-select, you can go to single value. You can also do things like change it to a drop-down list, which is handy if your options are like really long. You can also remove it so it doesn't have this all option as well, which is quite nice. So you can play around with that in your own time if you want. And the second filter I said we wanted was the allow you to kind of change the date range. So if you click on date of visit and drop that into filters, and again, we could, have a drop down that said January, February, March, etc. But what we want is a sliding scale of what they call range of dates. So that's actually the auto-selected one. But if I wanted a drop down that said like January, February, I could click on months and so on and so forth. So we want range of dates, next, and this just gives us like maximum to minimum. We can go in and play with it if we didn't want that, but we're happy with the date range that the date has given us, and we click OK. Again, it doesn't automatically appear. We need to right click and go to show filter. And now the user can kind of play around and only show, they can kind of zoom in on bits of the data. Obviously our date range is pretty small here, but if your date range was much bigger and you wanted the user to kind of be able to zoom in on particular areas, they can. So we're going to name this at the bottom, we're going to rename it, and we're going to call it visits over time. The last filter which I want to add is actually to the first graph that we made, the outcome change by service. If you go to the first tab, click on outcome change and drop it into filters, click OK, and again, show filter. Because we want our users to be able to also filter the whole dashboard to just see people that had a positive change, just had a negative change, etc. So again, go to the first tab of this, the first graph we made. If you click on outcome change sign, drag it into the filters box, right click, show filter. Amazing. So now we have answered 3 of our questions. We've said, how do the number of visits differ between services? We have a bar chart for that. How does the service usage change over time? We've got our line graph for that. And how do change in outcomes differ for each service type? We've got our stacked bar chart, our positive, negative, and none. And now we get to the fun bit, maps. So my big kind of thing, and I am so guilty of this, is don't be tempted to map it if you don't necessarily need to. So maps can look really cool, so it can be tempting to do it. But with things like maps, the way that you distinguish between certain areas, say we're using like a count of something. So in this example, it's count of free school meals in different data zones in Ayrshire. The humans are not as good at distinguishing the difference between 2 shades of a colour, or another kind of map would be the size of a bubble. What they are better at distinguishing is the length of a bar, which is why bar charts are like the king of charts. So if you did not need to know, if your kind of question was, which data zone has the highest number of free school meals, a bar chart is the best one to answer that. But if you need to know, like, where are the areas that have the highest number of free school meals and where are they in relation to each other on a map, then yeah, a map is obviously where you want to go. But I'm definitely guilty of mapping stuff just because it has that sort of geographic element. But yeah, it is harder for humans to distinguish between the two shades of color versus the length of 2 bars. There's 2 different kind of maps that we can do in Tableau. We can do a point map, which is where you've got like a specific longitude and latitude, which is maybe like, I don't know, a kind of someone's house, like a postcode, or the center of some kind of area. Or you can do what's called a polygon, and that's a kind of a whole area. So this would be something like a local authority or like a ward, or an outer postcode area. So like EH10 or something like that. That encompasses an area. So polygons are the way, or a filled map is the way you want to do this. So yeah, and in the 2 maps, you can do this in different ways, but the kind of standard way is in a point map, it would be the size of the bubble would represent like how many people are there or some other metric. And in a polygon, it would be the color there. So we are going to do our final graph, which is going to be our map. So we're going to do a new worksheet. And like I said at the start, postcode had already been set up to be a geographic thing, which is why it's got that little globe next to it. So if you click on postcode and drop it into here, it has recognized these outer postcode areas, which is nice. Now, in our data, if I go back to our data, you don't need to do this, but if I go back to our data, these are not specific longitudes and latitudes. Like, these are not people's full postcode. These are postcode areas. So what we actually want is a polygon map. So if you click on show me and you go to the second map, so the one in the middle of the options, you get something that looks like this, because they're outer postcode areas. They're actually areas. And they are all the same color because we've not added our like kind of dimension of data that we want to know. So we want to know how many people are in each of these areas. But right now, all I've got is which areas are people in. So I know there's no one in our data set that's over here, but I want to know how many people in each area. So to do that, what we want to do is we want to distinguish it by color. So if you click on the ID pill and drop it into color, you get this pop-up, which is fine. If you click on add all members, what this basically does is counts everyone as a different single category. So when it automatically does it, you get this random array of colors, but that's okay. What we're going to do is our usual steps. We're going to go across here and we're going to go to the ID, we're going to go to measure, and we're going to go to count. So again, drag the ID pill from service user data onto color, click select all members or add all members, I can't remember which it is, and then you go across to the ID pill here, right click, measure, count. And now we've got a nice way of distinguishing how many people are in each postcode. So I automatically know the darker color, the more people there are. So I know that this big fat EH41 is where all my users are, but also over here. I actually think sometimes blue is a little bit difficult to tell the colors. So if you click on color, edit colors, if you go to orange, yeah, orange. A personal preference, though, everyone is different, and you can select the color range for you. But I personally find orange is quite a good one, although it can be a little bit aggressive sometimes. So each to their own. The other thing I'll say about this is, like I said, you can have your own spatial files in Tableau Public. things that are really good for stuff like this, which people might have used, is the index of multiple deprivation, which is based on, in Scotland anyway, it's based on data zones. So these are not areas that Tableau would necessarily know how to pick up that area. So there's a really great video on YouTube, which is linked to the slides to do that. There's a link of where to get the Scottish ones, but I realise most people are probably using the English ones, and that will be on the government website to get that spatial file. And here is a little example of something I did using the shape file or spatial file from the Scottish Government website that has split up all the data zones, and you can, oops, didn't mean to do that, you can see that the darker colour, the higher the decile it is in the index of multiple deprivation. So yeah, that's another thing I was going to say actually, is you can select particular areas, like a particular postcode area, but you can also do this thing where you drag and select multi. You can also, so many options, hold down on a Mac, I think it's it's command. On a Windows, it's control. If you hold down that button, you can select multiple areas, which is cool. So we're going to bring this all together. I'm going to rename this map. I'm going to rename this last sheet map. So we are going to do new dashboard. So go to new dashboard. You can also go up the top to go to new dashboard. Like I say, in Tableau, there's many different ways to get to the same bit. So if you watch a different tutorial, you might see it in different ways. And what you'll see here is you can pick the size of your dashboard. So if you know that everyone's going to be viewing it on a browser or a mobile, you can select to fit that screen. But what we're going to go for is automatic. And that means the size of it will change relative to whatever screen size people are using. But if you know people are going to be using it on a phone or something like that, then you can do that. And then basically, we're going to shove all our lovely, beautiful graphs into this area. Now, down the bottom right, you can specify tiled or floating. So tiled or floating. Tiled is much more rigid. It brings it out in kind of like a square format. Floating gives you much more kind of control over where you put it, but they can all start to overlap a little bit. So what we're going to go as far as tiled, but you can use floating to have more control. And what you want to do is just click on each of the sheets. And the first one comes up massive. And then what you do when you drag another one down, if you keep clicking down, you can kind of drag your mouse to wherever you want it. So I want it to go here. I mean, you definitely don't need to follow me, but kind of flop them all over the place, wherever you like. And what you see is the sheet name becomes the title for each of them, which again, you can change if you want. And fantastically, all my legends and all my filters appear here, and you can move them if you want. You can move them. I'm going to click on outcome change sign one, and I'm going to drag that down because I think it's good to have all the filters at the top, but you can play around with this and move things to how you like. You can also do things like add a text box if you want to have a header, a title even, not a header. Let's say I call this charity dashboard. You can add images if you've got an organization logo that you want to put on. Oh, that was way too big. You can add, embed a web page and things like that. There's all sorts of things that you can do to change up your dashboard. I've also put a link in the slides to, which one are we here? I've also put a link in the slides to make like summary tiles. So this is quite good if you've got high level numbers that you want in your dashboard, and you can have little icons which kind of help people view them as well. So I've linked to a blog that's really good at explaining how to do summary tiles as well. We've not got any in ours, but it's kind of similar to what we've been doing. So the very last thing that we're going to be doing here is we're going to see how our filters work, right? Because if I go to my service filter and I unclick A and B, what you'll see is only my line chart changes. So only my line chart changes. And I'm always very cautious of having filters in a dashboard that doesn't change the whole dashboard. If you're going to do that, I would have the filter like right beside the graph and it kind of clearly highlighted in some way, because if people see a filter, they think it's applied to the whole data. So to get all our filters to be applied to the whole, all the data that's sitting behind every one, what we can do is in each of these filters in turn, if you click on the little box, you click on the little down arrow, and you go to apply to worksheets, all using this data source. I'm going to repeat this. So click on the little not legend filter, apply to worksheets, all using this data source. And then my last one, apply to worksheets, all using this data source. And now if I untick service A and B, it's applied to every one there, which is great. So now I can see where most of my people in service C are coming from and things like that and other bits and bobs. The very last thing that we're going to do, which is a really nice thing, sometimes you want the users to be able to filter them in different ways, but you don't want 100 filters. So there's no way for me to filter right now just to see people that are in a particular postcode. Like if I click on this, it doesn't actually work as a filter, which is maybe what you want. You might not want every graph to be a filter because it can get a bit overwhelming. But if you did want this, what you can do is if you click on the map one and you click on the little funnel and use as filter, what I can now do is I can click on the postcode area AH55, and what I now get, there's actually only one person from AH55. I now get, they visited the service 4 times in March, twice in April, and once in July, and they had a negative outcome change. So you can change it so your graphs are also filters. You could go through and do that for all of them. Like I could make this one a filter, and now what I can do is just select people who were in service C that has a positive outcome, and what I see is they are from these areas. So it depends on how much kind of you want to do this. If you want to have it as filters on the right hand side here, and or if you want your actual graphs to be filters as well. Fantastic. So we have made our dashboard. Happy days, and it answers all the questions that we wanted. I'm going to rename my dashboard. If you right click. Oh. Sorry, my mouse is not agreeing with me at the moment. Rename, charity dashboard. And what you can now do is if you go to File, Save, choose Tableau Public. Now, what you'll probably get if you don't already have, I'm just going to save the book one right now. If you don't already have a Tableau Public account, what you'll get is a thing to say, add an account. It's free. You can do that in your own time. So like I say, in Tableau Public, to save your file, your dashboard, what you have to do is export it onto the internet. So not good if your data is sensitive, but this is fake data, so it's not a problem. And of course, if it's open data, it's not a problem as well. So, yeah, cool. So the last thing, we've got too many tabs open. Where did my dashboard go? There it is. The last thing that we're going to do, here we go. Yes, great. So the last thing that we're going to do is I could send someone this, this URL, and they would be able to play around with the dashboard. And what you can do is once it's pushed onto Tableau Public, you can download it. So you can download it, like I say, as a static image, you can download it as a PDF, and you can also download the Tableau workbook, which makes it easy for someone else to play around with. You can also, I've never done this, but really cool, you can also get an embedded code to put it into like a website or a blog or something like that, which is really cool. We haven't talked about stories, but you can make a story from your dashboard and visuals. So like I say, the dashboard is about letting other people guide the data as they want, but stories are fantastic ways of you guiding users through your dashboard or visualizations. So what it is basically snapshots of your data, drawing the user's attention to certain bits. So this is our dashboard. And what I've done is I've added a little annotation, and I'm saying here, Service C has the lowest number of users, but highest number of visits. I'm drawing the user's attention to the fact that Service C has the highest number of visits. I can then go through it and say Service A users were mainly in these two areas. Service B had the highest percentage of positive outcomes for the service, and I point the users to say that Service C had the most amount of visits. So what it is a nice way of presenting your dashboard if you had to do it in a meeting and you wanted to guide people to certain bits. So instead of letting the user guide themselves, a story is a really nice way of letting you present it. Tips. A lot of these are repeats of Oliver's ones from Monday, which I was nodding along to. So I don't think you can do a 3D chart in Tableau, but don't do it even if you can. Make sure you have good labels and titles and stuff. We could have done a bit more there in terms of making our axis labels good. Don't overdo color, make sure it has a purpose, and also build up association. So if in your organization, you know, Service A is blue, Service B is green, make sure you're using that consistently throughout your dashboard so people kind of build up that association with the colors. Make sure your kind of graphs start at 0. Think about decimal points. Like some of them, I would have chopped off some of those decimal points because they're a bit overkill. Ordering charts from highest to lowest, unless they have up some other alphabetical order, is really good. But the big thing is simple is better, because, as we say, people get overloaded with information, and if it's too much, it'll not stand out. Lots of resources online. There's free online courses to do more Tableau stuff. The Tableau themselves do loads of really cool like blogs and videos, depending on how you best learn. This is all that's linked in the slides as well. I personally really like YouTube. I think it's good because you don't have to necessarily listen to full length tutorials. You can just search for particular things like, how do I upload a shapefile, or how do I make a map, and things like that. But everyone's different. You might find blogs better than the videos. I also want to point you to some other things when you might Google a question, because I guarantee if you're stuck on it, someone has been stuck on it before. Say I Googled add a new column in Tableau. What you'll get back probably, if you see the URL starting with help.tableau.com, that is the Tableau help blog type things, and they do nice sort of things that you can follow and gives you information. But another thing I want to point you to is if you see our URL coming up that says community.tableau.com, is this really nice, like I say, Tableau is really widely used, and it's a nice place where people can post questions and people will answer them. And people like upvote the question, the answers if they're really good. And I don't know if you can get downvoted in the Tableau one, I need to check. It's quite similar to this other website called Stack Overflow, and you get lots of arguing on these. I've not seen it as much arguing on the Tableau one, which is good. But I can guarantee if you're stuck on something, someone has been stuck before and asked that question. So this is really good for that kind of thing. The best thing to do, not to sound condescending, is literally just have a go with some data and break stuff, make a mess. That's the best way to learn. There's loads of free data out there that's open to use. You can also, there's a website called Mockaroo where you can mock up fake data. That's where I mocked up this data for today. So if you need things to be like of a particular size, you want to kind of recreate data that looks like your organization's data, but you want to, it's not actually your data and you want to just use it to play about, Mockaroo, which is a fantastic name, is a good website to do that. And yeah, thanks very much. Hopefully that wasn't too fast. Never really too sure about speed-wise. If people are following along, I'm not able to read the chat as easily. But hopefully you find some of that helpful. If you've not used Tableau before, I will put a link to the slides just now. And yeah, all my contact information is there if anyone's got any questions or anything. And I also just finally like to say that I have made a kind of an app online which lets you navigate through, it's loading, I've got too many things open, navigate through the Scottish charity data a bit easier from Oscar, and it allows you to kind of filter in different ways and compare charities and where they are. If anyone's interested in Scottish charity data, maybe not, but always welcome feedback. So that's linked in the slides as well. So yeah, thanks very much. And if you've got any questions, I guess I'll have a look. I'll actually just link the slides here, but if this link doesn't work, please let me know. But yeah, if anyone has any questions at any point, really, keen about this kind of thing. So anytime, reach out. I'll be more than happy to answer. Let's see in the Q&A. Oh, lots of questions. Does it have to be a CSV file or is a standard Excel okay? Need to convert Excel? Good question, James. No, it doesn't need to be a standard CSV one. If it's an Excel one that has multiple tabs, what you can do when you go to the data source one, I can't get back to that page actually, but there's an option on the kind of left-hand side where we had our original data. You can go to Excel and it brings each of the tabs through as different tabs, which is really great because it means you don't need to save every tab as a new CSV. So yeah, Excel is also an option on Tableau Public, which is great. Does Tableau recognize ONS areas? Good question. Yes, I believe if I try to change like local authority, I think, yeah, I'm sharing screen? I think I still am. You go to, sorry, yes, you go to change data type here, geographic role, and there's NUTS Europe there, so you can change that. To that. Local authority, I think, comes under county, because I've tried to use this local authority data before, and it's county that comes under. So yeah, those two are options there. Can you connect two tabs of the same spreadsheet, or does it have to be two separate spreadsheets? Yeah, I think you can connect two tabs of the same spreadsheet, I'm pretty sure. Maybe don't quote me in case that's not true, but I think I think because we've only got CSVs, when you bring in the Excel, it'll bring through as two tabs. I am going to double check that though, Juliana, and I will get back to you to double check that. That's a good question though. How can I sell the idea of using Tableau to my colleagues, given everyone's using Excel at the moment? Would you say the main characteristics that make Tableau look better from Excel? Well, hopefully after today, you've seen that it does look a bit better. Sometimes things like geographic information and things like that you wouldn't be able to show in Excel are a good sell. And I think one of the big things is the fact that you're able to bring all sorts of data from different sources and do these like joins and things that would be really hard in Excel, I think is a really big sell. And that ability to drill into the data. Now you can make kind of dashboards in Excel, but I think Tableau is it's a lot easier to build. Like it's sometimes with Excel, you have to do all these complicated formulas to get places. So yeah, hopefully after today, we might have more selling power. But yeah, show them a nice map and hopefully they'll be converted. But the learning curve for Tableau is not too steep if you're quite used to using Excel formulas and things. It's a lot of drag and drop. So yeah. I'm using Salesforce. Do you know much about Tableau and Salesforce? I actually don't, unfortunately. I'm not totally sure. I know that you can connect to different data sources, and I imagine Salesforce will be one of them. So no, sorry, I don't know too much about that. But yeah, good question. Maybe someone else will know, but yeah. Cool. I think we're finishing in 2 minutes. So thanks very much. Hopefully I've answered all your questions, but like I say, please message me if you have anything else. And yeah, hope you got something out of it. So yeah, thanks very much for attending.